Hi, this is the video for Daf Shevui, Daf Vav of Masechet Ketubot. This whole daf, even the beginning of the second half of last week's daf and the continuation of Daf Zayin for next week, are all about one subject which I'm sure many of you are, to a certain extent, struggling to get through, finding it obscure, somewhat of a difficult subject, and that is the permissibility of a man having sex with a virgin on Shabbat. The Gemara brings up several possibilities. The primary possible malacha work that is being performed is what's called chabura, wounding, which is prohibited in various ways in rabbinic literature, most likely as a derivative of slaughtering, the idea being that one cannot cause a wound to another human being or to an animal on Shabbat, and that letting the blood out is similar enough to slaughtering that it is prohibited on Shabbat. But there are other malachot, other avot malacha, arch categories of work that are mentioned on this daf, including the idea of construction by making an opening, and various other malachot that are mentioned, which to a certain extent is also very obscure to us. If you have not learned Masechet Shabbat, when you learn Masechet Shabbat, you can see that the rabbis throughout the Masechet try to struggle to put all potentially forbidden activities into one of the 39 forbidden activities on Shabbat. It is not all that easy, and this gets us astray to the issue of Shabbat observance, which I don't want to get into right now. But I realize that the issue is a little obscure for many of you. I will note that it does seem to be an active, real halacha l'maaseh, practical issue for the rabbis. There is no denying that the rabbis were concerned with issues, rabbis of the Talmud were concerned with issues of virginity, and they already seem familiar with the possibility of people getting married on Friday, which became quite prevalent in the Middle Ages, and therefore the idea of whether it was permitted or not permitted to have sex with a virgin on Shabbat was a halachic issue for these rabbis. This is not just a theoretical issue, as many of the discussions throughout the Talmud are. And you can even sense this in a curious little bit that gets in the beginning of the Gemara, beginning of Daf Vav, where it says, in the house of Rav, they said that Rav permitted, and in the house of Shmuel, he forbid, and then Shmuel forbid. In other words, in Rav's yeshiva, they said Rav permitted, and Shmuel forbid. But in Nehardea, which was Shmuel's yeshiva, where Shmuel was the head of the academy there, they said Rav prohibited and Shmuel permitted. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, in a later Amora, immediately notes that the way to remember this is everybody is lenient on themselves. In Rav's yeshiva, they say Rav allowed it, and in Shmuel's yeshiva, they said Shmuel allowed it. And there's a couple things that are interesting here. The first is this intentional shaping of the debate such that the result is desirable. In other words, in Rav's yeshiva, they shaped the debate between Rav and Shmuel such that the result would be desirable for them, meaning it would be permitted to have sexual relations, for a man to have sexual relations with a virgin on Shabbat. And they did the same thing in Shmuel's yeshiva. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak notices, does not deny it. He does not say that Rav's yeshiva had their authentic tradition and Shmuel's yeshiva had their authentic tradition. Rather, he says that each yeshiva wanted to shape the tradition so that it was lenient on themselves. And I think that this is something that we notice throughout rabbinic literature, the attempt to shape the tradition so that it matches the results that the rabbis want it to match. Of course, this is balanced by an authentic transmission of tradition. I am certainly not saying that the rabbis always shaped their traditions to match the results that they wanted to see, but that at times we have to acknowledge that the rabbis did do that. They did shape the transmission, the traditions of these oral Torahs that they had received from their rabbis such that they would match the desired outcome. In this case, I could say a funny remark and say for the purpose that they wish to achieve, to allow men to have relations with their new brides on Friday night. That is the halacha. We'll see this at the end. And therefore, it stopped being a practical halacha because it was permitted. But in the rabbinic period, this was an active debate in halacha l'maaseh, and we will continue a little bit of discussion this in next week's daf.